Okay, in this chapter I want to talk to you about multi-camera editing. It's a new feature inside of Final Cut Pro 5 HD. If you want, you can follow along and go inside the source materials folder. We've created a folder called multi-camera editing and we have 4 camera angles for you to work with. We have already imported our 4 camera angles, and what we want to do next is set an endpoint on the sync point, or in our case we used a clap. If I double click on camera 1 and we zoom in and take a closer look at the viewer, you can see that I've already set an endpoint for my sync. If I click on the audio tab, you can see the spike for the clap. Let's check it out.
1, action.
Okay, you can hear the clap on camera angle 1. And then if we double click on camera angle 2, which is the cutaway, we've also set an endpoint synchronizing at the clap. And then our other 2 shots are B-roll. Our next step is to create what's called a multi-clip. We can lasso our 4 camera angles, or we can shift select them. After we have them all highlighted and selected, our next step is to go to modify and create what's called a multi-clip. We can also right click on the selected clips and go to make multi-clip. Once we choose the make multi-clip, it pops open the make multi-clip window, and we want to decide whether we're going to synchronize using endpoints or time code. If you use professional cameras, they have what's called free run time code. You can set them all to free run, and you can use time code to sync up your multi-clips. In our case, we're going to go with endpoints. Once we've chosen endpoints to synchronize with, if we come down and look at the media for the 4 camera angles, check out this line right here. This represents our endpoint on the media, so you can see we have some footage in front of the endpoint. On this particular angle, that's the absolute beginning. And down here on camera 4, you can see there's not quite enough footage for us to use towards the end of the synchronizing of the edit. So we want to make sure that we get out of camera 4 before we finish up there. All right, let's go ahead and click OK to create the multi-clip. Now our next step is to double click on the multi-clip and let's load it inside of the viewer, and then let's click on the overwrite to bring it down to the timeline. I'm going to press Shift Z to compress it and press the home key to make sure that our playhead's at the very beginning. Our next step is to go to the top right-hand corner of the timeline and we want to click on RT, and we want to make sure that we have multi-clip playback selected. All right, we have a check mark there. That looks good. Now, our next step is to make sure that we have the playhead at the very beginning of the timeline. Then we want to double-click on our multi-clip that we have on the timeline. It's going to load it inside of the viewer. Once we double click on the multi-clip to load it in the viewer, let's zoom in and take a closer look at this drop-down menu here in the middle. It's called Playhead Sync, and we want to choose Open, and then we want to select the shot that's going to be our master audio. And we're going to go back to this drop-down menu, and right now it's on video and audio. What that means is if we select each camera angle, it will take the video and the audio, but we want to have the top left angle be the master audio. So we're going to choose Video. And when we select off this clip, you can see that it has a green highlight indicating that it has master audio, and our other clips will have the blue highlight indicating that they're going to be video only. Okay, let's make sure that we have the shot selected that we want to start out with. Let's zoom out. Let's make sure that we don't have anything selected on the timeline. Make sure your playhead's at the beginning, and let's go ahead and play. And what we'll do is we'll choose our camera angles in real time, and it will edit together for us. Here we go. I'm going to press play, and let's get started.
Well, living in the life of 2D and 3D digital world is a very, very creative one. I would say that I'm pretty happy in the field that I chose because the software allows me to do things that I wasn't able to do years ago, meaning 5 years ago for that matter. The latest version of this, the latest version of that allows me to push my creative potential a little further every time. Albeit it's a little expensive, but also I'm surrounded by people that are creative, whether they're digital artists like myself or musicians that work in electronic music using different softwares and hardwares. So all in all, I'm very happy with the field that I chose.
Okay, so you get the idea. If we zoom in and take a closer look at the timeline, you can see all the edits that have been made. Let's zoom back out and we'll go ahead and scrub through this, and if we look over here in the canvas window, you can check out all the different edits. Our next step is to collapse the multi-clip if we would like to use effects. If we want to apply an effect to this particular shot, while it's a multi-clip, it will apply the effect to all the shots. So what we need to do is highlight this. Let's right-click on this. We have them all selected, and we want to choose Collapse Multi-Clips. We can also do this on the top menu. Remember, we can go to Modify, and we can choose Collapse Multi-Clips. Now that we've collapsed them, we can double-click on an individual shot and load it inside the viewer, and that way if we want to use a video filter, it will only apply that effect to this particular image and not all of the images that's on that master camera angle. Now that we've applied our effect, what we can do is highlight all these clips again, and we can go back to Modify and uncollapse them back into the multi-clip, and that way if we would like to continue editing where we left off, we can do that. If you're happy with your multi-camera edit, you can play it back to tape or export it as a QuickTime. That concludes this quick chapter on multi-camera editing inside of Final Cut Pro 5. In this chapter, I want to talk to you about capturing HDV footage from the Sony FX1 camera. Right now we're in the DV-NTSC 48K setting. Let's change that by clicking on the name Final Cut Pro in the top left-hand corner. Let's go choose Audio Video Settings. And when the Audio Video Settings window appears, we want to change our sequence preset from DV-NTSC 48K to HDV 1080i. Let's take a closer look at that. Okay, so there it is, the HDV 1080i 60 field setting. The next thing is we need to change our capture preset from standard definition DV to the HDV setting. So now we have HDV for our capture preset. The last thing that we need to do in this window is we need to change our device control to Sony HDV Firewire. That way we'll be able to control the camera or deck through the capture window. Let's click OK. Now the next thing that we need to do is create a new sequence because this current sequence is in standard definition mode. Since we don't have anything going on here, I'm just going to close it out. And I'm going to go to File, New Sequence. You can tell that our canvas window is now in the 16:9 mode. Alright, let's capture some HDV footage. Let's click on File, and let's go down to Log and Capture. It's going to open up our Log and Capture window, and you can see that it's in the 16:9 mode. The next thing that we want to do is actually to click on our capture settings and make sure we know where we're going to record our HDV footage. Let's click on Capture Settings, and then we're going to click on Scratch Disk. I've actually already set up my scratch disk to record on my AV drive, and I have a folder that's actually called HDV. So I'm good to go, but make sure you point to a folder where you know where your footage is going to be. The next thing that we want to do is click on Clip Settings, and let's take a closer look. If we want to record audio and video, you want to make sure that both of these boxes are checked. And this little thing right here is something new in Final Cut Pro 5. It says create new clip on start and stop. So what that means is every time you paused and started your camera, Final Cut Pro, while it's capturing, if you run the whole tape in, will actually make a new clip for every shot change. We'll go ahead and leave that check for right now, even though we won't need it for what we're capturing. The next thing that we want to do is click on Logging, and then we want to give the media file a description. If we don't give the media file a description, it will be labeled as untitled on the hard drive. Okay, we'll press return to make that take. And now what I want to do is press play, and we will see our footage preview into Final Cut. Alright, there's Tim playing guitar. Now, if we want to see what our levels look like, if we click on Clip Settings, we can see our audio meters. If we just want to capture some footage on the fly, we can just click on Capture Now. I'm going to click on Capture Now. And you can see that we're now capturing HDV footage in Final Cut. When we want to stop recording, it's the same thing as standard definition. We just press Escape. We'll let it roll here for a couple more seconds so you can check out the 16:9 HDV footage being captured. Now I'm just using a PowerBook G4 and using the internal laptop drive. Remember, HDV requires the same amount of bandwidth as DV. It's about 3.5 megabytes or 4 megabytes per second. Okay, that's enough footage for right now, so let's press Escape. And we've just captured our first high definition clip with Final Cut Pro 5. Let's go ahead and close out our capture window. If we zoom in and take a closer look in the browser window, you can see that we've captured our clip. If I double click on the clip, it will load it inside of the viewer, and I'll scrub through it and you can check it out. Here's our first 16:9 clip. If we want to bring it down to the timeline, we'll just press F10 or click on the little overwrite edit. Alright, that concludes this really quick segment on capturing HDV footage with Final Cut Pro 5. Okay, in this chapter I want to show you how to make a very simple DVD with DVD Studio Pro 4. DVD Studio Pro 4 comes bundled with Final Cut Pro Studio, or you can buy it separately. Okay, we've exported two different versions of our clip out of Final Cut. We made what's called a reference file, and you'll notice in the labeling of the footage that I actually put ref in the name of the clip. Remember, a reference file will not play on another system without the original source footage. It's referring back to the original media files, so therefore it makes a much smaller clip. See, it's only about 39, 40 megabytes worth of information. We also exported a self-contained final clip, which we'll select that, and you can see that it's much larger. It's about 109 megabytes. So once again, the reference clip would not play by itself on another system without the master footage. Okay, we're ready to go ahead and launch DVD Studio Pro. So when DVD Studio Pro first starts up, what we want to do is make sure that we have the proper window configuration. You can go to Window, go to Configurations, and I know it sounds crazy, but we're actually going to choose Advanced. This is the setup that we get. We have our graphical view. We have our Assets window down here. This is where we import our media files. Over here is the window where we design our DVD, such as a menu. And down here we have a timeline. And this is our inspector. And this is probably going to be one of the most used windows in the DVD Studio Pro application. And then we have our palettes window. I'm going to go ahead and just close out the palettes window for a second. Now that we've closed out our templates palette, over here you can see what's called the inspector. Let's zoom in and take a closer look. This is our inspector button and our palette button, so if we were to accidentally close out our property inspector, like so, we'll do that. We can just go back and click on the inspector button and bring it back. Okay, let's go ahead and get started making our simple DVD. What we want to do is actually click on the outline view in DVD Studio Pro. For this simple lesson, I believe it's easier. We've done that. Let's go ahead and set up our preferences in DVD Studio Pro. We're going to click on the name DVD Studio Pro. We're going to go to Preferences, and we're not actually going to be authoring a high definition DVD. That's where it wants to put you by default. We're actually going to be working on a standard definition DVD. Let's click on the MPEG-2 SD tab, and our aspect ratio is 4:3. We didn't work with any widescreen content for this. The Bunny movie's in 4:3. Let's roll with that. The Bunny movie was shot on mini DV, so we definitely want to leave that as drop frame timecode. Our field order, I would go ahead and leave that on auto if you're unsure. Most of the time mini DV footage is even field first, but just leave it on auto. The next thing that we need to look at down here is our encoder. Notice right now the mode is on what's called 2-pass VBR, or 2-pass variable bit rate. When we create a full training product on DVD Studio Pro, I'll get into all the nuts and bolts of the MPEG-2 encoder. For now, we'll keep it simple, and I'll tell you where to put the settings. 2-pass VBR is the best video quality, but it will take the longest to render or encode. We'll go ahead and leave it on 2-pass VBR. And notice that my bit rate is about 5 megabits, and our max bit rate is 7.5 megabit. You never want to put this all the way at the maximum. Consumer DVD players just can't handle it, especially older laptops. So we'll go ahead and leave our settings here at an average bit rate of 5 megabits and our max bit rate at 7.5. Down here under motion estimation, you definitely want to leave this on best. And that way, if you have fast action movement, the image quality will be the best that it can be. Down here, the last thing that we want to look at in our encoder is the encoding method. Do we want to do background encoding, or do we want to encode on build? If you have a G5 or a Mac Intel machine, you definitely want to leave it on background encoding. What this means is while you're designing your DVD menus, that it will render or encode your QuickTime's into MPEG-2. Encode on build would take a lot longer for you to render. However, encode on build might be a good option if you're working on an older system like a G4 or a G4 PowerBook where it's not that fast. And while you're designing your menus, if it hiccups on you and it slows down, you'll probably want to switch to encode on build. All right, we're good with our encoder settings. We'll go ahead and click on apply and then let's click OK. The next thing that we need to set up under our preferences is the destination where our clips will render. We'll go ahead and click on destinations up here on the top menu, and down here where it says show encoding, we're actually going to choose the file path where our Final Cut Pro project files are located to keep it really simple and neat for backing up. We'll click on the AV drive, Final Cut Pro project, and in here are my master clips, and we'll go ahead and make a new folder and we'll call this DVD files. And that way all of our rendered encoded MPEG-2s will go inside of this folder. We'll click choose and we'll click OK. Alright, we're finally almost ready to make a simple DVD. The first DVD that I'm going to show you how to make is a DVD with no menu. It just fades up from black. Let's come down here to the bottom left hand corner of the application. This is our assets window. So we're going to click on import, and we're going to actually step into our Final Cut Pro project file, and we can either choose the ref or the final. It doesn't really matter. I'll just choose the ref and we'll click import. Okay, we've got our footage now in our asset window. Let's go ahead and make a very simple DVD. We're going to click on the video thumbnail, the clip in the assets window, and we're going to drag and drop it here on track 1 under the tracks folder. We've just created our first video track. Now let's click on the name of the DVD and let's take a closer look at our property inspector. Okay, so here is the actual name of the DVD. We'll highlight this and go ahead and give it a name. Press return once you put the name in there. So notice on the programming it says first play menu 1. Well, we actually don't have a menu on this. We just want it to fade up from black. If we come over here and take a look at our outline view, we can actually just select menu 1 and delete it because we don't need the menu. We can always add another menu later. So now we just have the DVD and the video track. So on first play, let's go to tracks and stories, and there's our final edit, and we can choose track or start. We'll just choose track. So the other question that we need to ask ourselves is when the clip is finished playing, what do we want to happen? Do we want the DVD to stop playing or do we want it to loop continuously? If we want it to loop continuously, we'll come over here and actually select the track itself, and on end jump it says not set. So that means when the track is finished playing, it will stop. But if we want it to loop continuously, on the end jump we'll just go back and tell it to start playing again. Okay? So now we are ready to simulate our DVD. Up here on the top menu, if we click on simulate, we can test our DVD. Let's do that.
It was a typical Tuesday night. You know, nothing of importance going on. I just pulled into my...
Alright, we can see that our DVD works fine. And if we're ready to go ahead and put this on DVD, it's very simple. As long as we have the green status down here, we can just go to File, Burn, and make our DVD. Alright, that concludes this very quick segment on how to make a DVD with no menu in DVD Studio Pro 4. Thanks for checking out this bonus chapter about DVD Studio Pro 4 menus. Inside of After Effects here, I've created an animated menu that I want to import inside of DVD Studio Pro. Let's check it out. Okay, you can see I have cascading text and video clips and text that wipes on. And I've also got an animated background and a pulsing little light bulb. Okay, these are all things that would be very difficult to do inside of DVD Studio Pro, but those of us that know how to use After Effects or Motion, we can create an animated motion menu. And then what we can do is make these video clip frames button highlights. Okay, so this was my After Effects project where I assembled a menu. Now that you see what type of animated menu that I wanted to create, let's talk about the project settings and exporting to DVD Studio Pro. I want to click on the composition window and I want to choose composition on the top menu, and I'd like to choose composition settings or Apple K or Control K PC. If we zoom in and take a closer look at our project settings window, you can see that I'm working with the NTSC DV720 by 480 preset we click in the menu from the presets, you can see that this is one that you can choose. And when you choose that, it's going to plug all the variables in for you. The key thing that you want to put in is the duration. When you're creating an animated or motion menu for a DVD authoring program, I recommend at least 20 to 30 seconds of loopable video so that the user will have time to make a selection on your DVD menu. What we'd like to do is go ahead and output this menu for DVD Studio Pro. I'm going to click on the timeline, and then I'm going to click on Composition and go to Make Movie or Apple M or Control M on PC. It's going to open up our render menu. And what we want to do is zoom in and take a closer look. We want to click on Best Settings. And when the render settings window comes up, we want to make sure that our quality is on best, our resolution is full, and that we're using the comp's frame rate at 29.97. Let's click OK. The next thing is we want to click on the output module right here where it says lossless. And this is going to open up our output module settings. And we can choose our format. We want QuickTime Movie to export for the DVD authoring program. And if we come down to Format Options and we click on this, this opens up our compression settings. Now there's lots of different compressions out there, but we only really want to focus on a couple of different compression schemes. If we click on Compression Type, if you just want to put something right back on mini DV tape, remember you can choose the DV/DVC Pro NTSC compression setting. Since we're going to be encoding for DVD, I recommend putting it out with no compression, none. It's going to be a much larger file size. This 30-second clip will be almost a gig. It'll be about 900 megabytes. But it will actually be a little bit crisper on our DVD instead of rendering out in the native DV/DVC Pro NTSC codec. So I'm going to choose none, make sure my frame rate is correct, best quality, click OK. We don't have any audio included, but we did bring this menu into Soundtrack Pro earlier and we scored some sounds which you'll hear inside of DVD Studio Pro. So I'm going to leave the audio unchecked. I'm going to click OK. And then on the output 2, you just click on this and you give the file a name. We'll call this DVD menu and we'll put it inside the DVD files folder. We'll click Save and then we'll click on Render. And this will make our video clip that we want to import into the DVD Studio Pro Assets window. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at DVD Studio Pro now. I'm going to go ahead and click down here on the dock on the DVD Studio Pro icon, and we're going to launch DVD Studio Pro. Okay, you can see that I've already assembled the project inside of DVD Studio Pro, and what I'm going to do is break down the project to you so that you understand what's going on. If we come over here to the top left-hand corner where our outline view is, you can see the hierarchy of our DVD. You can see right here is the DVD itself, the name, and then we have our menus folder. We actually have 2 menus, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then we have our tracks folder, which is our actual video that's on our DVD. Okay, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And what I want to do is go ahead and come over here and grab what's called the inspector, and I want to move this right next to our outline view. Inside of the outline view of DVD Studio Pro, when we have the DVD icon selected, notice that in the property inspector that information comes up. So here's the name of the DVD, and look right here where it says First Play. This is one of the most important things that we want to take a look at when we're authoring a DVD. When you insert the DVD into the DVD player or your computer, the player is going to first play this clip. It's like an auto run on a director project or a projector file. And you can see that our DVD standard is SD, Standard Definition DVD. This is one of the new features of DVD Studio Pro 4, is that you can not only author a standard definition DVD, but you can author a high definition DVD. Okay, so that's the general information when we have the DVD icon selected. There's also some other tabs here. We have the disc and volume, where it shows you how much space you have on your DVD. We have region and copyright settings, and we have some advanced settings that we'll talk about later. Let's go ahead and click on the General tab. And now let's go down to the menu and let's go ahead and select Menu 1. And when we select Menu 1, you can see that the Property Inspector changes out and it has settings for our motion menu. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit. So here's the Property Inspector. And you can see that we have video on this particular menu and that we have a loop point. On Menu 1, it only plays for 6 seconds and 15 frames. We wanted music to play across the animated build, but it wouldn't work, so we actually had to split the menu up into 2 clips. So our first menu goes from 0 seconds to 6:15, and then if I come over here and click on Menu 2, you can see that menu 2 picks up at 0 and goes to 24 seconds. And we've spliced the menus together using a timeout command. If we go back and click on menu 1 inside the property inspector, at the end it says timeout 0 seconds, and you can see that our action is to go to menu 2. So that's how our programming works. So if we go back and select the DVD icon, once again, the first play is the Shift DVD Open, which is this track down here in the track list. And then after this clip plays, if we click on the Shift DVD Open, you can see that on end jump, it says M1, which means menu 1. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the simulator so that you can see how our DVD is working so far. Okay, when the music fades up, that's when actually the menu 2 starts. Now you can see our highlight states on the buttons. And of course, if we want to play one of these videos, we just click on the button. And we were able to make our menu dissolve. And the video clip starts playing. Okay, so now let's go ahead and double click on menu 1. And let's call that page up. So I'm going to move our inspector back over here. And let's talk about this menu page. You can see that we're on the menu tab. And here's our video clip that we have on menu 1. So many of you are probably wondering, well, how did you get that video in there? It's pretty simple. If we come down to our assets window, if we zoom in and take a closer look, there you can see there's the file menu 1 that we exported out of After Effects and we've imported inside of DVD Studio Pro. And if you just click and hold down on that file and hold it on the menu window, you can see that it will ask you for different selections. And we chose the first one that says Set Background. Okay? I don't want to do that since I've already added the file to the background. If I come over here and I click on the little running man, you can see our clip play. And it will just loop over and over if you leave the running man on. Alright, so now let's go double click on M2 for menu 2 over here in the outline view. And you can see that it's switched over to our menu. Now we've actually added button states, like I mentioned earlier in this chapter, is we wanted to make these video thumbs actual buttons. So it was pretty simple how we did it. I'll zoom in and show you. I'll actually delete this button off and add it again so I can show you how to do it. I'll delete that. So this is how simple it is to add a button on a menu inside of DVD Studio Pro. You just click, hold down, and you can draw a button. Okay, there's the state. And of course, the property inspector is very important when we're creating buttons. So while we have that button selected, you can see here in the property inspector that we can target the button to a particular video track. So we'll click and hold down on target. I'm going to go to tracks and stories. And on this particular clip, I want to choose the CUH2A, and I'm just going to choose chapter 1. So now when we click on this button, it's going to target that particular video track. All right, what we want to do now to complete our programming is come back over here to the outline view, and if we click on the CUH2A video clip, if we zoom in and take a closer look, you can see on the end jump that that's going to go back to menu 2. So that's how the programming works with the buttons. Now let's talk about button highlights. If I click on the button again, we'll load that back inside of the viewer. And if we zoom in and take a closer look at the property inspector while we have our button selected, if we click on the advanced tab, you can see that we can choose navigation for our remote control, but we want to click on the colors tab. Right now we're going with advanced, but we're in grayscale mode so that we can get this really nice light gray highlight. And then if we click on transition, you can see that we're able to add a transition to the button. We can also make it the same as the menu, or if we click on the list, we can choose a custom transition that we'd like for each button. Pretty simple stuff, actually. Let's zoom back out. So if we click on button 2, the information for button 2 loads inside of the property inspector. Okay, so this is this particular button set. So you can see all these buttons look the same. So that's how simple it is to add a button inside of DVD Studio Pro. Okay, so I showed you how to make really simple buttons inside of DVD Studio Pro. I want to show you how to make an Easter egg button. Some people are asking me about this. So if we zoom in and take a closer look here at our menu, let's say that we wanted this area of our light bulb to be a button. if I just click and hold down and draw, I can make a little button. Now the only problem is that when someone cycles around, they're going to see this button highlight. So we can put a button here, but it's not really ideal. So you might want to create what's called an overlay inside of Photoshop. Okay, I've got Photoshop CS open and I want to create an overlay for my DVD Studio Pro menu. I'm going to click on File and I'm going to go to New. And let's take a closer look at our presets. From the preset, we want to click and we want to go down here and choose NTSC DV 720 by 480 with guides. And then for the background contents, we want to choose Transparent. And we'll give this a name and we'll call it Overlay 1. And we'll click OK. Okay, so we have our Overlay 1 document, and now what I want to do is go click on one of my brushes, and I'm going to go with brush 32, and I want to come down in this area and I want to guesstimate that my light bulb would be right in here somewhere. We can always move this, especially if we put it on another layer. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my layer tab and let's click on this and let's add layer 2, and we'll move this out of the way. And I'm going to click right here twice to make it a little bit dark. We'll say 50% opacity. It looks pretty good. And now I'm going to go ahead and click on my Move tool. I'm going to go to File, Save As, and it's Overlay 1. I'm going to put this inside of my DVD files, inside the Final Cut Pro source material. Click Save. Click OK. I'm going to go ahead and hide Photoshop. Let's go back down to the dock and let's click on DVD Studio Pro. And now let's come over to our asset window, and I want to click on Import. I want to go to LAP250, Final Cut Pro Training, DVD Files, and let's choose Overlay 1, PSD, and click on Import. Okay, so we've imported that file, and let's go ahead and scoot the menu window over a little bit, and let's see how well we were able to place this hidden little Easter egg. Click on Overlay. I'm going to come over here and click and hold down on the menu window. If we zoom in and take a closer look, we actually want to choose what's called Set Overlay. Set Overlay. So I'm going to drop that on Set Overlay. Let's zoom out. And what we want to do now is we're just going to draw a really big button so that we can try to locate that overlay. Okay, we're not seeing it, and that's because we didn't enable the overlay inside the Property Inspector. If we go back and click on the menu background, Overlay 1, and we're going to choose actually layer 2. That's why we can't see it. Remember, we put that on layer 2. All right, so let's go back over here to the button. Aha! So now you can see that overlay coming through. So we're going to size this box down to where it's a lot smaller. Now you can see that I didn't position that too well with the light bulb. It needs to move a little bit up to right in this area. So what we can do is if we go back to Photoshop, that's why we put it on layer 2. We'll just grab it and we'll move it over here. Apple S to save. Let's hide Photoshop. And if we come back over here, you can see that it's already moved. And there it is. So we just need to come up just a little bit more so you can see how well Photoshop integrates with DVD Studio Pro. On the update, there we go, save, hide Photoshop, and we've got it in there pretty good. Okay, so there's our little overlay. We'll zoom in so you can see that better. You can experiment with overlays. They're pretty cool. You can make special shapes for rollover buttons and all sorts of cool things. All right, so we can put a link on that button, and we could actually have a hidden video track if we wanted to put something in our tracks list. And this could play a special secret little video clip that no one would know about unless they happen to be rolling over in this area and find the Easter egg button. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and I actually want to remove the overlay. I'm going to select the menu, and if we lose the Property Inspector window, which like we did, if we come over and click on the arrows, we'll choose Inspector, and I want to go ahead and actually turn off the overlay. I'm going to put on Not Set. All right, let's talk about outputting our project out of DVD Studio Pro. We can go to File, of course, and just choose Burn, and put our blank DVD in and make a DVD. And of course, this is after we've simulated the DVD and we've tested all the buttons. Or we could build it to the hard drive, and that way we could use Toast to make multiple copies of our DVD. If we go to File, Advanced Burn, Build, what we can do is actually choose a folder on our hard drive and we can render this out. It creates two folders. It creates what's called an audio_TS folder. If we had digital Dolby audio, the audio would go in here. And this folder right here is what's called our video_TS folder. And this is where our video files for the DVD are located. Without this folder in the root directory of your DVD video, it will not play. Okay, so I recommend, like I said, exporting your DVD out this way, and that way you can use Toast and the Apple DVD Player software to open and test your DVD. I'm going to hide DVD Studio Pro. On this particular hard drive, you can see that I've rendered out an audio underscore and video underscore TS folder, which makes up a DVD. You can see how it's inside of another folder, so all I have to do is drag and drop this on Toast to burn it. Before I do that, I want to use the Apple DVD Player to check and make sure my DVD works. So I have the Apple DVD software open. I'm going to click on File, Open Video underscore TS folder, and then I'm going to go choose our file to open. Okay, I'm going to choose the video underscore TS folder, and I'm going to come down here, and we're going to click on Choose, and this way I can test my DVD as an image on the hard drive before I burn it with Toast. I'll click on Play, and I'll click on Menu to skip the open. And it looks like my DVD is functioning. We've already tested our buttons in the simulator inside of DVD Studio Pro, but it's always a good idea to simulate it with the DVD player software before you burn it. Okay, so we're ready to burn this inside of Toast. It's actually very simple. What I'm going to do is come down to the dock, and I'm going to click on Toast, and we're going to open up the Toast window. Now what we want to do is actually click on the Data tab and not the Video tab, because we already have the data on the hard drive. And then what we want to do is make sure we have the Advanced tab on the right here selected, and we're going to click on DVD-ROM, and then I'm going to come down here and click on the Add button, and we're going to go find our DVD image, which is buried on my hard drive. Okay, so I'm going to choose this folder here that says Shift Video, C1, choose, and you can see that it adds our files, and we're ready to burn. All we have to do is put in a blank and click on Burn. Once again, it's very important that this video_TS folder sits on the outside of the directory. If we were to accidentally put this folder inside of the audio_TS folder, for example, our DVD would not work inside of a consumer DVD player. We need to make sure that we have the video_TS folder on the outside of the directory. Now, if we wanted to make a hybrid DVD and we wanted to add data, it would be very simple. We could just add, click on Add, and let's say we wanted to add a QuickTime, click on Choose. You can see now we have a structured DVD that will play inside of a DVD player, or we can put it inside of a computer and access data. You can store your photos, your music, your source files, and all sorts of other data with your video DVDs. For right now, I'm going to delete that off there. I'm going to select it and press Delete. And like I said, I can toss in a blank and click on Record, and I have a video DVD that will work in a consumer DVD player. All right, that concludes this quick chapter on basic menus inside of DVD Studio Pro. Okay, we just finished up our scene in the Bunny movie, and now we're ready to take this over to Soundtrack Pro and do some Foley and some sound sweetening. First, we want to add what's called a scoring marker so that we can lay in our Foley, such as punches or footsteps. What I want to do is make sure that I don't have anything selected on the timeline, and I can do that by clicking in the gray background. Now what I want to do is go ahead and use the arrow keys to cue up my playhead at the point when Brock Mellows gets knocked out. So I'm going to use the arrow keys, and I'm scrubbing through the video. And I'm saying right there's a good place to add the punch marker. So once again, I don't have anything selected. What I want to do to add a marker is double click the M key really quick, or press it, really fast twice, so that we can bring up our markers window. Let's zoom in and take a closer look at markers. What I want to do is add what's called a scoring marker. I'm going to click on Add Scoring Marker. And I want to give it a name. I'm going to call it Bunny Punch. And we'll click OK. We've just added our first marker. Let's zoom back out. And now let's go ahead and bring this back a little bit. And we want to go ahead and add some markers in for the taps. So I'm just clicking through, or I could use JKL. I'll use J to rewind.
Yeah, but I was doing.
Okay, L to play,
I was right up at my.
K to pause. Now I'm going to use my arrow keys. Okay, right there's the first tap, so I'm going to double click the M key. Nothing is selected on the timeline. And we're going to add the scoring marker, and we'll call this one tap 1. Click OK. Let's use the arrow keys to go ahead and queue up again. Okay, there's our next tap. Double click the M key. Okay, we'll call this one tap 2. And we'll add a scoring marker, and for good measure, we'll go ahead and do the other tap. It gets tapped 3 times on the shoulder. Okay, there's our other tap. Double click the M key or press it twice really quick, whatever you want to say. Add scoring marker, and we'll call it tap 3. You guessed it. All right, now we have finished inserting all of our scoring markers inside of Final Cut Pro 5, and we're ready to export this clip with the scoring markers over to Soundtrack Pro so that we can create our soundscape. What I want to do is create what's called a reference clip, so it'll be a much smaller file size, and it will point to all of the master media that's on the timeline. However, this reference clip will not play on another computer. All right, let's click on File, Export, QuickTime Movie. And when we open the QuickTime Movie export, what we want to do is go ahead, I'm going to call this Final Edit with Markers. And I want to go ahead and put this in the LAP 250 FCP Training, Soundtrack Training. And I'm going to put this inside of the Bunny Movie Foley 1 folder. So Final Edit with Markers. Let's zoom in and take a closer look at our settings at the bottom of the QuickTime Export window. Right here on Setting, we want to choose DV NTSC 48K. And we just actually want to include the video because we're going to rebuild the soundscape inside of Soundtrack Pro. Markers, we want to make sure that we have audio scoring markers. And down here at the bottom is the Make Movie Self-Contained checkbox. Remember, we want to create what's called a reference file, so we're going to leave this box unchecked. If we check this box, it will make a self-contained video clip that we can play on another machine, but we don't want to do that. So we're going to uncheck it. I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to go ahead and click Save. This clip will export pretty quickly because, like I said, it's going to be pretty small because it's just going to be a reference file. All right, that's almost finished exporting. And the next trick that I want to teach you is if I hold down the Apple key and I press Tab, I can tab between my applications. You can see that I already have Soundtrack Pro open, so I've selected that and I'm going to let go of the Apple key, and it opened up Soundtrack Pro. Here's our finished product that we created inside of Soundtrack Pro. I'd like for you to take a look and listen so you can get an idea of what we're going to teach you here.
It was a typical Tuesday night. You know, nothing of importance going on. I just pulled into my driveway and my thoughts were only of beer and peanuts. I was right up at my door and all of a sudden, it must have been a lead pipe because I got hit and I was knocked out cold.
Okay, you get an idea of what the lesson is about. So we're going to use Soundtrack Pro to create a soundscape for our video. What I want to do is go ahead and close out the finished project. I'm going to click in the top left-hand corner of the project window. I'm going to choose Don't Save. Now I want to click on File, and I want to go to New Multi-Track Project, or Apple In. Okay, we have our new fresh Soundtrack Pro project. Let's talk about the Soundtrack Pro windows before we get started. In the top left-hand corner, this is the window where I can look at my video clip and also have some other tabs here that we should talk about. Let's take a closer look. So once again, there's the video tab. We have our recording tab so that if you're actually going to use Soundtrack Pro to record, you can record voiceovers or music into Soundtrack Pro. You can see that we're using a Mark of the Unicorn FireWire 828 unit to input and output video out of Soundtrack Pro. So it does work with FireWire and USB professional audio interfaces. We also have a master of meters, and we have details. We're going to go ahead and choose the video tab, and let's come down to the bottom and let's take a look at the browser window. The browser window is somewhat similar to the window inside of Final Cut Pro, except we can view our hard drives. We have copied DVD 3 of the Final Cut Pro 5 training to the LAP FireWire drive. So I'm going to double click on this FireWire drive, LAP250, and it will give me a folder directory of the files. Here's the folder that I copied over from DVD3. I'm going to double click on the FCP training folder, and we have soundtrack training. Let's double click on that. And now we want to step inside of Bunny Movie Foley 1. We're almost there. Okay, here's the source files that we're going to use to put together this segment. I'm going to go ahead and zoom back out. And now, over here on the right-hand side, this is our project window where you can see we have our audio tracks, we have time code, and if we zoom in and take a closer look up top, you can see we have some basic tools. We have our selection tool, we have our razor tool. Over here is our beats per minute or tempo of the project. We have the time signature, the key that the project is in, which is a pretty interesting feature of Soundtrack Pro. And we have what's called the sampling rate window. If you're working with DV or HDV, you're probably going to be using a sampling rate of 48 kilohertz. If you're going to be working with high definition audio, you're going to probably be at 96K. We're going to go ahead and leave our sampling rate at 48K. And over here at the top left hand corner of the project window, you can see we can create a new project, create a new audio file, or add a new track. And we can also add time and beat markers. Now I want to go ahead and add my video clip to the video window inside of Soundtrack Pro. I want to come down here and click on the video clip that says Final Edit with Markers. I want to drag and drop this clip right here inside of the window. You can see right here's the window where the video is going to play back. If I press play, you can see it play. You see the playhead updating over here in the project window. And here we have a film strip view on the project timeline. Notice that our scoring markers all came through from our Final Cut export. Let's zoom in and take a closer look at that. Check out all those scoring markers. So that saves us a lot of time in Soundtrack Pro when we want to insert our music, voiceover, and Foley effects. Okay, let's come over here and I want to show you what will happen if we add a video clip that already has audio attached to it. Let's go ahead and drag this video clip here that says Final Edit with Music. And I'm going to drag and drop that into the video window. And you can see that changed out our video clip. We still have a film frame, but this clip actually brought the audio with it. This is a version that we exported earlier, and we did a few scoring markers, but we didn't do all of them. But I just want you to check out that it will bring in audio that can be manipulated with a video clip. So if you want to do some of the sound work inside of Final Cut Pro, you can and export that as an audio track with the video clip. And then you can add other audio layers on top of it. Or you can sweeten the sound that comes with the video. Let's go ahead and grab our clip that says Final Edit with Markers again. The Soundtrack Pro interface is very similar to Final Cut. If we zoom in and take a closer look, you can see the little zoom slider that we have. If I pull this to the left, it will zoom in, and you can get a closer look at our marker list. Notice how we can scroll through our Soundtrack Pro timeline. Okay, we're ready to go ahead and insert some of our Foley sounds. Notice that we have car pull-up marker right here at the very beginning, and here's the sound that we need, auto SUV. So I'm going to go ahead and click and drag and drop that here on track 1. If I go ahead and let go of that, see the little plus sign there next to the mouse cursor, you can see that we've added that file. Let's zoom back out, and you can see that it will update. Okay, now that we have our clip on here with the markers, I want to show you how to go ahead and add the sounds from the library that we've given you. Notice over here on the left-hand side in the browser window, I have my music clip highlighted. It's called Trance 3. I can actually preview it here in the browser. Check it out. I'll click on play. And you can see that I can adjust the volume. Okay, so I want to go ahead and use this file. I have my playhead queued up at the music start scoring marker. I don't have anything on track 1, and I'm going to click and hold down on Trance 3. I'm going to drag it, and notice I'm going to lock it right here to the playhead, and I'm going to let go. Let's take a look and listen with the music and video. Click on the video tab. Let's back our playhead up, and here we go. Okay, so I want to go ahead and roll back, and notice how I can scrub through the music to cue it up. Notice in the beginning we have some silence, so let's click and hold down, and we can trim that in. Okay, we'll trim it to about there. Now let's click and hold down and we'll move the file back. Let's take a look and listen again. Okay, much better. All right, let's move up to the punch and let's add in some of those sounds. Okay, so here's Bunny Punch. Let's put the playhead here in the numbers. Notice that I can scrub around and it will give us a scrubbing sound of whatever audio we have on the timeline. Here is where the Bunny Punch should go. Let's come down here and notice that we have a sound called Body Hit 8. Let's click on that and preview it. Okay, sounds like the one to me. I'm going to click and hold down, and I want to drag and drop this and line it up right there with the Bunny Punch marker and let go. Notice how it updates the name of our tracks. Let's go ahead and back up our playhead a little bit and let's take a look and listen. Okay, it's a little late. If we zoom in and take a closer look, you can see that the audio waveform doesn't start right away, so we might want to trim that in a little bit, like how we did the music. So let's go ahead and zoom in. And let's grab our position indicator and let's put it over the edge of the file, and we'll trim that in a little bit. Okay, now let's move it back one. Let's zoom back out by using the slider. I'm dragging it to the right. Let's click in the time code with the playhead and press play. Okay, I'm going to show you an easier way to do this. If I click and hold down in the numbers, I can actually set an in and out looping bar that we can drag, and that way we can preview the punch. Okay, you get the idea. I can also click and hold down on the sound, and notice that the video clip frames will update. Okay, looks pretty good. If I zoom in even more, all right, check this out. We can get a closer frame by frame positioning of the sound file. Okay, now that I've added the Bunny Punch sound, what I want to do is fade my music down and then have the wake up sound come in. I twirled down the triangle on the Trance 3 track so that I could access the rubber bands for the volume. If we zoom in and take a closer look, you can see here's the volume track. And if I double click and make a node, and then let's come down here and we'll double click and make another node, I can have my music fade out. I'll zoom back out. Let's click right here in the time code numbers a little bit ahead of time of the node. Okay, so you can see how we were able to fade that music out, and all we have to do is grab that little node and we can actually change the position of where the music will fade out. If we make it longer, obviously it'll take longer for the music to fade out. If we make it shorter, the music will fade out sooner. All right, here we go. Okay, so now we've got that going on, and I'll go ahead and add another sound for you. We want to add the bell cascade sound onto track 3. I'm going to click and hold down on that sound. And let's line it up right there with our scoring marker on track 3. You notice there's the marker, there's the sound. All right, let's back up the playhead and take a look and listen. Okay, so there's our wake up sound. Okay, we've added all of our Foley, our voiceover, and our music into the scene, and we've almost got a completed soundscape here. What we want to talk about now are using effects with Soundtrack Pro. If we zoom in and take a closer look at the track where our voiceover is located, it's actually called Final Edit No Music, but we exported a version of the video clip out with a voiceover only. We actually added compression to the voice to sweeten it up a little bit. Let me show you how to use effects inside of Soundtrack Pro. If we click on the little star on any of the tracks, if I click on that star, that's Show Effects. If we come over here to the browser window, you can see that the browser window is now the Effects tab window. We can get back to browser by clicking on browser, but let's go to Effects. And now we're on Effects for that particular track. You can see that I've already added compression to this particular track to sweeten up the voiceover. How did I get to compressor? If I click on Soundtrack Pro in the list, you can see that we have our effects here, and I scroll down to compressor. All right, here we go.
You know, nothing of importance going on. I just pulled into my driveway.
If I uncheck the compressor, we're able to temporarily turn off the compressor so that we can listen to it without effects. All right, here we go.
It was a typical Tuesday night.
Okay, that's without, and here is with.
It was a typical Tuesday night.
Okay, one more time without.
It was a typical Tuesday night.
Okay, you can hear that the compressor makes a very big difference with the voiceover. Now, we also have some presets that you might want to experiment with. We zoom in and take a closer look at the bottom right-hand side of the compressor. We'll click on Show Presets, and you can see that we have some factory presets. Let's twirl down this triangle, and you can see that we have vocal compressors. And if you scroll through the list and you would like to try one of these presets, all you have to do is select it, then click on Apply Preset. Okay, we're done with the compressor for now, and I'm going to unsolo the track. Let's go down here and take a look and listen to maybe one of the other tracks, like Footsteps, for example. Let's solo that track and let's take a look and listen. Okay, sounds pretty good, but we can click on the effects star and let's see what we can do with these footsteps. You notice that I've already added a compressor to enhance those. We click on advanced, we can look at the compressor, and let's see what's happening here with the sound. Okay, not bad. We may want to bring those up just a little bit. We can either bring up the volume on that track or we can experiment with the compression. I'm going to bring up the volume just a little bit and let's go back and listen. All right, that's a little bit better. Okay, I've given you a basic overview of Soundtrack Pro, of how we can sweeten up our scenes. All right, now that I've got all my effects in the Soundtrack Pro timeline, what I want to do is check my levels to make sure that everything is mixed together okay and I'm not going into the red. What I want to do is bring up my audio mixer. I can do that by pressing Apple and 2, or I can click on Window and go choose Mixer. Okay, so here's our audio mixer. And notice that the names come through from the tracks. I'm going to grab that and stretch that out a little bit. All right, let's play this and take a look and listen at our levels on the audio mixer.
It was a typical Tuesday night. You know, nothing of importance going on. I just pulled into my driveway and my thoughts were only of beer and peanuts. I was right up at my door, and all of a sudden, it must have been a lead pipe, because I got hit and I was knocked out cold.
Okay, sounds pretty good. You can see that we didn't go into the red on our master track, and you can see that the other levels were pretty good also. If you'd like, you can get in here and make some adjustments and sweeten the mix according to your tastes. The key thing is you want to stay out of the red, which we did. All right, let's close out of the mixer. Now we're ready to export our audio mix for Final Cut Pro. Let's go to File, Export, Export Mix. It's going to open up the Export Mix window. We just want to make sure that we're at 16-bit 48K since we're working with mini DV footage or HDV. If you're going to work with high definition sampling rates, you can make adjustments accordingly. Okay, let's zoom back out. And let's call this BM Final Soundscape. All right, and let's choose the Bunny Movie Foley folder, and we're going to export this mix. You can see that it exports the mix out. All right. Now let's hold down the Apple key, and let's tab over to Final Cut Pro. We're back inside of Final Cut Pro, and now I'm ready to import back in my Final Soundscape. I'm going to right-click in the browser window, and I'm going to go to Import File. And I want to choose the LAP250. Let's go to the Final Cut Pro training folder, soundtrack training, Bunny movie folder, and let's bring in the final file. And here we go. We have BM Final Soundscape. Let's choose that file. Here it is. Let's double click on it to load it inside the viewer, and let's take a listen. Okay, sounds good. It's working. All right, so let's add this to our Final Cut Pro timeline. Let's move our playhead back to the beginning. And what we're going to do is actually turn off these audio tracks that we're not using. I'm going to scroll down, and we're just going to drag and drop this right here at the beginning of the timeline. Let go. Shift Z to compress the timeline so that I can see everything. All right, let's take a look and listen and see how well we did creating this soundscape.
It was a typical Tuesday night. You know, nothing of importance going on. I just pulled into my driveway and my thoughts were only of beer and peanuts. I was right up at my door, and all of a sudden, it must have been a lead pipe, because I got hit and I was knocked out cold.
Okay, it looks like technology worked for us and everything synced up okay. We're ready to export this and put it on DVD. That concludes this quick chapter on using Soundtrack Pro with Final Cut Pro. Okay, in this bonus chapter on Soundtrack Pro, I want to talk to you about creating music or music beds for your video or film projects. If you copy the FCP training source material folder to your hard drive, you step inside that folder and click on ST Training, you'll see that there's a folder called STP Music, and here's the project file. I highlighted it in red, so if you'd like to double click on this project file and dissect the project, go right ahead. Okay, you can see that I've already opened the project inside of Soundtrack Pro, and I want to go ahead and play it for you and let you check out a little bit of it, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, that was a real quick track that I threw together inside of Soundtrack Pro using the sound library that ships with Final Cut Pro Studio. Okay, so let's talk about the project. Over here is the project timeline, which I'm sure you gathered by seeing the audio tracks on the timeline moving. Down here is our transport controls. We can jump back to the beginning or jump to the end. And over here at the bottom left-hand side of the timeline window, some of these controls should look very similar to Final Cut Pro, such as the track height. You can see that we can change the height of the tracks so that we can get in there and look at our edits really close. I'm going to take it back to here. We also have our zoom slider where we can zoom in and zoom out. And speaking of zooming out, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out and let's scroll down the timeline. Look, I can use this little guy right here and grab this to navigate through the timeline. At the top of the timeline, I can also use this graphical user interface. It's really nice GUI here. Notice how when I click and hold down and drag this that I can scroll through my tracks, and if I pull it to the right or to the left that I can scroll down the timeline. It's a pretty interesting way to navigate your project inside of Soundtrack Pro. If we zoom in and take a closer look at the top of the timeline window, we can see our selection tool. We also have a razor blade tool. Here's the tempo, something that's very familiar to musicians or DJs, the beats per minute. We also have our time signature, and we can change the key, and we also have our sampling rate. Right now we're using 48 kilohertz, which is perfect for mini DV or HDV footage. However, if you're going to work with high definition audio, you might want to choose 96 kilohertz. Over here on the left-hand side of the project is our video tab. If we had video that we wanted to create a soundscape to, we'd have our video clip playing in here. We have our recording tab, so we can check our input levels and also choose our audio recording device. Over here is our meters tab, and this monitors the meters that's on the timeline. I'll show you. Okay, so there's our meters, and then we also have details, and this is our inspector. So if we select a particular audio file or video file on the timeline, if we come over here, you can see that it's giving us very specific information about the particular clip that's on our timeline. Okay, so that's the Details tab. Let's go ahead and take it back to the Video tab. Let's go down here to the bottom left-hand corner of Soundtrack Pro, and you can see that we have our browser file, which looks very similar to Final Cut Pro. We can also search for particular sounds, and we have a favorites, a bin, and then our Effects tab, which we'll talk about later when we're adding effects to our audio tracks. I want to go ahead and take this back to the browser window. I'm going to double click on this fireware drive, and you can see that I have my Apple Loops library. I'm going to double click on this, and let's go inside the Power Effects Loops folder. And if we go inside of Complete Music Beds, I'll double click on this. Let's preview some of the completed music beds. You can see we have a volume control right here. Okay, that gives you an idea of some of the files that you have to work with. I'm going to go ahead and start a new project to show you how simple Soundtrack Pro is to use. I want to go ahead and close this out. I want to go to File, New, and I want to create what's called a multi-track project. Okay, we have a fresh timeline. I'm going to double click on the hard drive that has my Apple Sound library. And let's go make a track real quick. I'm going to double click on the Power Effects Loops folder. And let's go to drums. I usually start with drums first. And I'm feeling electronic today. Let's go to electronic beats. And let's preview some of the sounds. Okay, I like that sound. I want to add it to my timeline. It's very simple. I'm just going to click and hold down on the track. I'm going to drag and drop it on track 1. Okay, you can see it over here on the timeline now. Let's go ahead and play and check it out. Okay, you can see how that perfectly loops when we add something to the timeline. Now, this is where our tempo comes in. If we zoom in and take a closer look, right now we were at 120 beats per minute. If we want to make like a house track, we might want to go up to 125. I'll type in 125 and press return. Let's listen real quick. Okay, you can hear that our tempo is faster. Now that we've added our first element, let's go ahead and play it, and we can preview the other sounds with the sound that we have on our timeline. I'll show you, it's easy. Okay, I like this sound. I want to add it. Okay, we'll keep going. This time let's step out of electronic beats and let's go into bass. Now we'll go into electronic bass. Okay, if we like this bass line, we can add it. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Notice up here in the top right-hand corner, if we take a look at our meters, you can see that we've gone into the red. Okay, so that's one thing we want to watch out for when we're mixing our levels inside of Soundtrack Pro. All right, let's go ahead and zoom back out. Okay, now that we've got 3 audio layers on the timeline, let's talk about manipulating these audio tracks. Let's zoom in and take a closer look. Over here on the track is our volume control. Okay, if we want to solo this track and we only want to hear these drums, we'll click on the little headphones and we'll solo it. Here we go. And if we click on the solo on the next track, we can add this one in. Or drop it out. Okay, we can also adjust what's called our pan, and we can also set the audio output. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the solo. Let's go ahead and collapse the triangle and show the envelope. Okay, we have volume envelope. So for example, inside of Final Cut, you're kind of used to adding different nodes and fading up the audio. I just double clicked right there to add a node. I want to go back and grab the first one, and now we can have this track fade in. I want to go ahead and solo the track, and let's check it out. Okay, if I want that to fade longer, I can just click and hold down on the node, and I'll stretch it down. Let's go back to the beginning, and here we go. Okay, that should give you an idea of what you can do with the envelope as far as volume is concerned. I'm going to go ahead and just move this back up. I'm going to put it back at 0 dB. Now, if I want to get rid of this node, I just click on it and press the delete key. It's gone. Of course, if I make a mistake, Apple Z, and it's right back again. Okay, let's go ahead and twirl this triangle back up. So that gives you a basic overview of what's going on each of the tracks. I want to go ahead and turn off our solo mode. And let's play this one more time. Let's talk about the mute button. Okay, that gives you an idea of how the mute button works. It's a little speaker. Now down here on the baseline track, you can see that it doesn't go all the way. If we mouse over the edge of this track, notice that we get the little stretch symbol, and we're going to go ahead and grab that, and we can stretch the loop out so that it matches. And let's back that up and play it. Okay, gives you an idea how to stretch out your baseline. I'm going to undo the stretch. If I hold down the Option key and click on the baseline, I can duplicate it. Of course, now I need to be careful how I let that go. It was a little bit off. I'm going to undo that. Let's actually zoom in. And you can see the little tick marks as we zoom in. These little notches is where the audio will snap to. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down the Option key. I'm going to drag out another copy. And you can see how it wants to snap to those lines. So if we want to make finer detail, we'll have to zoom in more. Okay, so we get more tick marks. And I want to grab this audio file and we'll pull it down. Okay, here we go. Okay, that gives you an idea of how you can stretch out your music. Let's go ahead and zoom back out. Okay, now let's go ahead and add a few more parts. I'm going to go ahead and go back over to our sound library, and let's go to, I want some keyboards. Let's double click on keyboards, and I want to go ahead and double click on synthesizer, and let's check out some of the loops. Remember, we can play our timeline, that way we can preview the sounds with it. Let's do that. I like this sound. Let's go ahead and add this one. We'll drag and drop it over. And let's compress our timeline so we can see everything. And here we go. I'm going to go ahead and stretch out this clip. I'm going to hold down the Option key and drag out a copy. And if we hold down the Control key, notice how I can preview. I want to zoom in a little bit more. There we go, we have that nice and lined up. Let's zoom back out and let's preview what we've got so far. Okay, not bad for a quick start. Could be a music bed for credits. So we need to mix our levels. We're still in the red, so what we want to do is call up our audio mixer. If we click on Window, we can go to Mixer or Apple II. Okay, so here's our mixing console. And if we zoom in and take a closer look on the tracks, you can see that we've already spiked into the red on a couple places. So we might want to start out by pulling some of these levels down, and we'll go ahead and reset where we've gone into the red. And let's pull our master down. And let's go ahead and preview this track from the beginning. We'll zoom out so we can see the entire mixing console. And let's go ahead and cue this back up. All right, here we go. Okay, not bad. Now I'm going to show you how some of the individual faders work. We'll just play it and I'll mess with the mixer. Working with our pan. Okay, that gives you an idea how the mixer works. I'm going to give you a tip. You definitely probably don't want to go above -2 on the output of the master fader. And remember, with digital audio, when you go above 0, it will clip. One last tip, if I want to add some effects to one of the tracks inside of Soundtrack Pro, it's very simple. Let's zoom in and take a closer look. On our synthesizer track, let's click on the star. This is the show effect. And if we come over here on the left-hand side, you can see that we have our effect library. I'm going to click on Soundtrack Pro, and here's our effects. I'm going to add some chorus. It's pretty simple. All I have to do is select chorus and click on the plus sign. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and solo the synth track so that you can hear the chorus effect. Here we go. Okay, you can hear the chorus. If I want to make adjustments to the chorus, I'm going to click on Advanced, and that will open up our widget, which looks a lot like Logic because it is a Logic plugin. Here we go. Okay, so we've added some chorus. If we want to add different effects, we can. We'll scroll down, and I will go down and we will add a flanger. I'll double click on flange to add it, or I can click on the plus sign. Okay, here's flange. I'll click on Advanced. Here's the flanger. Okay, if I like what I hear, I'll close out the effects, and let's go ahead and turn off the solo and add in the other tracks. If we want to temporarily turn off our effects, we can just uncheck the effect. That way it's still in the list, but if we don't want it, we can also select on it and we can press on delete. Okay, it's gone. Okay, so let's say that we're ready to export this mix back to Final Cut Pro. It's pretty simple. We'll just go to File, Export, Mix, and if we zoom in and take a closer look, we want to make sure that it's at 16-bit 48K since we're going to go back to Mini DV, and we'll give it a name and we'll save it. It's that simple, and then you import it back inside of Final Cut Pro. That concludes this very quick chapter on making music beds for your video or film projects inside of Final Cut Pro 5. Okay, in this chapter I want to be talking about using Soundtrack Pro to create a digital Dolby 5.1 surround sound mix for your video or film project. On my Final Cut Pro 5 HD timeline, I have an independent film that we've cut. And this was actually done for the 48-hour film festival. You can check out voteapollo.com or nightat.com. Okay, we actually have about 13 or 14 audio tracks that was mixed with our film. So we've got plenty of sound to create a 5.1 mix. Now we did our project in kind of a hurry because it was a 48-hour project. So our tracks aren't labeled the greatest. So I recommend that you actually label your tracks a little bit better than what we have. So it's really simple actually to get this over to Soundtrack Pro and leave all of the audio where it is on the timeline synced with the film. What I want to do is actually go Apple A to select everything, and then if we zoom in and take a closer look, I'm just going to right click on any of my audio files, and I want to choose Send to Soundtrack Pro Multi-Track Project. And what this is going to do, it's actually going to export our project. It's going to create a Soundtrack Pro project file, and it's going to export all the audio, lay it on Soundtrack Pro's timeline in sync with our film. Now, of course, just like any cooking show, I've done this ahead of time. I will go ahead and show you what happens, but I'm not going to complete the process because it would take too long on camera. It takes about 10 minutes to export this timeline out to Soundtrack Pro. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and choose the Soundtrack Pro multi-track project just to show you what happens. It opens up the save window. Notice it just takes the name of our sequence and plugs it in there. It's called Movie Edit. And that's actually what we named our sequence file. You can see it right here, Movie Edit. And it just plugs that name in there. And then we're actually going to choose a folder, Soundtrack Training, and we've created a folder called STP 5.1, and you can see that we've already done this a couple of times actually. Here's the file that I already have open in Soundtrack Pro. It's called Movie Edit Sent. Now, when you click Save, notice down here it says Open in Soundtrack Pro Multi-Track Editor, if you leave that checked, and include background video. Sometimes it works great, and sometimes it will just open Soundtrack Pro and sit there, but it will actually still create the Soundtrack Pro multi-track project. You just may have to go open it with Soundtrack Pro. So since I've already done this, I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to click on Cancel, and I'm going to hold down the Apple key, and I'm going to tab over to Soundtrack Pro, and let's take a look. So here's our project that we actually opened. It's called, once again, movieeditsent.stmp. And here's our film. You can see that all of our audio is laid on the timeline just as it was inside of Final Cut Pro. Let's go ahead and play a little sample of it for you.
All right, rock fans.
The audio is where we left it inside of Final Cut Pro 5, and everything's great. The next thing that we need to do is actually, if we want to make a digital Dolby surround sound mix, is we have to create 6 individual outs. You can see that I've already done this down here at the bottom left of the timeline. Let's zoom in and take a closer look. I've already created these outputs. It was really simple. All I had to do was right click on the output and say Insert After Output. I'll go ahead and do it, and then I'll delete it. See how it inserted the output, and then all I did was just come here and choose what outputs I would like. Okay, now we only need 6 channels to create a digital Dolby 5.1 mix. I'm actually going to go ahead and delete by doing undo that file. Okay, by default we had an output that said A1 and A2, and I actually just clicked in here and changed the name to Output Left and Right, which is going to come on channels 1 and 2. Down here under this output I labeled it Surround Left and Surround Right, and this is going on channels 3 and 4. So channel 3 out would be Surround Left, and channel 4 is Surround Right. And our other output is for the center channel. That's where most dialogue is in film, especially on a 5.1 digital Dolby mix. And that would be on channel 5. And then the LFE, low frequency effect, or subwoofer, will go on channel 6. So let's come up here to the timeline. And for example, we can see this siren that's on this audio track. If we click and hold down, let's say we wanted this to come through the rear speakers, Surround Left and Surround Right. I could choose that output. And now what I want to do is go ahead and move that pan to the middle. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and zoom out, and let's scroll up, and let's put our dialogue on the center channel. Okay, the radio voiceover. Let's put this on the center channel output. Let's go ahead and pan this all the way over to the left, so that will come out of channel 5. And I'm going to come up here where my actor dialogue is. Here's my actor's voice. And let's output this on the center channel. And let's pan that all the way over to the left. You want to create a surround field that makes the viewer feel like they are there. Do the best that you can. You may have to do some experimentation. The only problem with Soundtrack Pro is the panners are only for left and right, and it's not really a surround panner. So you may have to do some experimentations with your mix to get the surround mix the way you want it. Okay, now that we have our individual channels and we have everything routed the way we would like, let's go ahead and create our surround sound mix. What we're going to need to do is come up here and click on File, and we're going to go to Export with Compressor. We're going to use Compressor 2. It's going to pop open the Export to Compressor window, and what I want to do is come down here where it says Encode Video. If I zoom in and take a closer look, let's click and hold down on this list, and we actually want to go to Audio Formats. And let's come over here, and we're going to go down to the bottom, and we're going to choose Dolby 5.1. We want to come over here and choose Edit Channel Layout. Edit Channel Layout. Channel 1 is our left channel. Channel 2 is right. Okay, it has channel 3 for the center channel. We actually want channel 5. The low frequency effect, we want that to be channel 6. Surround left, we want this to be channel 3. Surround right, we want that to be channel 4, and we're actually not using the center surround, but we'll go ahead and leave this on 7. If we like what we see, we'll go ahead and click OK. And now what we want to do is go ahead and choose where we'd like to record this file. We'll select a folder, and we'll go ahead and click on Export. Now we have already done this. And let's double click on our fireware drive and step inside the FCP training and go inside of soundtrack training. And here it is, STP 5.1, and here's the .ac3 file that creates. Now, here's how you make your 5.1 DVD. What you want to do is import this AC3 file into DVD Studio Pro, and then you would drag and drop this on the track inside of your DVD Studio Pro authoring program, and this will be the audio, and it will be in 5.1. And of course, you want to play it back on a consumer system and a professional system to check your levels. Okay, that concludes this quick chapter on how to do a Digital Dolby 5.1 mix using Final Cut Pro 5, Soundtrack Pro, and Compressor. Okay, in this chapter, I want to talk to you about some After Effects basics that we can use with Final Cut Pro. I've just launched After Effects 6.5 Professional, and you'll notice that it gives you what's called the tip of the day. And you can read the tip of the day if you'd like, or you could uncheck it so it doesn't bother you at startup. We're going to click OK. When we first start After Effects, you can see that it has here in the top left-hand corner what's called an untitled project file. And notice that file extension, the .aep for After Effects project. You want to make sure that you leave the extension on, that way if you want to go cross-platform between Mac or Windows, you can do that. We can import into the project window a couple of ways. We can right-click or control-click in the white or gray background of the project window and choose Import File or Multiple Files, or we can go under the File menu and choose Import File for a single file. In our case, we want to import a folder, so we're going to choose Multiple Files. Now we're going to step inside of our AV drive, which is our drive that's optimized for audio and video. It's separate from our OS drive where the After Effects application and the operating system are. And this would be the equivalent to a D drive on a PC. So we're going to step inside of the Final Cut Pro project files, and we're going to go down. I want to choose this folder that says Walk Up to House, and you can see that we have all of our media divided into folders inside of here. But if I take this one folder, it will bring everything organized. We're going to click on Import Folder, and then once that's done, we're going to click on Done here at the bottom right. And now let's come over to our project window and take a closer look. You can see that we've imported the folder from our Final Cut Pro project file folders. Now let's zoom in and take a closer look at the file structure. You can see we have the bin or the folder, and if we twirl down the twirler, you can see that our other folders came through organized just as we had them for our Final Cut Pro project. All right, let's just get some clips in here so that we can talk about manipulating media with After Effects. Before we can bring anything into the project, we have to create a composition. We'll click on Composition, and let's choose New Composition or Apple In or Control In on a PC. Okay, we need to ask ourselves a couple of questions here about our preset, what we are outputting or designing for in After Effects. Since most of you are using Final Cut, Premiere, or Avid, you're probably working with DV-based video. This is an excellent preset to start with, the NTSC DV preset. 720 by 480 pixels, and notice when that preset is chosen that it plugs in all of the variables for you. It also creates that 0.9 pixel, which is very important to output to analog NTSC interlaced television. It plugs in the frame rate. The main thing that you need to pay attention to is the duration, how long you want your composition to be. We're going to type in 1000 for 10 seconds, and we will come over here and click OK. All right, so now that we've created our composition, you'll notice that we now have a timeline, and we also have a monitor, and we had some tools laying around before. So what we want to do now before we start working is go ahead and arrange After Effects in a way that we would like to work. So I'm just going to stretch out my timeline, compact my monitor, compact my tools, and we notice how we can dock these on top of each other to clean this up a little bit. We can redock. Now the next thing we want to do is go ahead and save our setting. Let's move that here. All right, let's say we like where everything is and we want to lock it into place. We can go to Window, Workspace, and let's go to Save Workspace. And I'm just going to call this Justin 1 and click OK. So here's what happens. If I scramble these windows, if I'm an inefficient operator and I'm using the mouse and scrambling everything, I can just go to Window, Workspace, and choose my setting, and it puts everything back nice and neat. It's a real good handy setting. Okay, now we're ready to bring some media down here to the timeline in this composition. Before we do that, let's note a few things. Notice that the title of this timeline is Comp1. That refers to this file here in the project window. If we want to rename this from Comp1, we select it and we press the Return or Enter key. Notice how it highlights and we can give it a name. I'll call it Demo1, and by pressing Return, you can come down here and see that Demo1 is now the name of this composition or timeline. And also notice below the name that we have time code and our frame rate. Let's zoom back out. Okay, now let's take a look at our media here we have in the video folder, and I'll collapse the folder. And you can see that we have different clips. If we want to preview the clip, we just double click on it and it launches the media file and we can play it. Let's do that. If you noticed here at the top of the project window, it tells you the exact settings of your video clips and the compression. You can see that this clip is at 720 by 480 pixels using the D1/DV NTSC 0.9 pixel aspect ratio, the duration, the frame rate, and the video, all-important video codec. Millions of colors, DV/DVC Pro NTSC, and this is the codec that you want to stay at, especially if you're working with Final Cut, Avid, or Premiere. Take note of the audio, 48 kilohertz 16-bit stereo. Okay, and we can use our arrow keys to scroll down through the media. Notice that the thumbnail changes. I'm going to start out with the clip car pull-up, and to bring this down to the timeline, it's really simple. I'm just going to drag and drop it onto the timeline. Okay, here's the media clip. Notice that you now see it in the monitor, and we have what's called our position indicator or playhead, whatever you'd like to call it. I can grab this and scrub through the footage. Notice that our composition is 10 seconds long, just like we told it in the composition settings. Well, what if I made my timeline too short? What if I need to extend the timeline? Let's just click on Composition, and we'll go to Composition Settings or Apple K or Control K PC. Okay, so we want to change the duration of our composition from 10 seconds to 30 seconds. We just highlight the 10 and we'll type in 30, and we'll click OK. It doesn't appear that the timeline has been extended because the media still looks the same. But if we zoom in and take a closer look at the bottom of the After Effects timeline, you can see this little slider. If we drag this to the left, it will zoom out or compress the timeline so that we can see all the media. If we take a closer look, we can see that our media, well, it's only approximately, if we drag our playhead to the end and we look at the time code, it's 11:28, but we have extended our timeline to a full 30 seconds. Okay, we've scrambled our windows a little bit. Remember, window, workspace, just choose it to put everything back nice and neat. Okay, so now we're scrubbing through the media file. All right, so here is what we need to talk about next, is the basic transform tools. We have a layer, so let's take a look at what we can do with this layer. If we zoom in and take a closer look, you can see that we have the twirler, and if we twirl down the twirler, you have what's called transform tools. When you add effects or masks, you will also see another twirler for those. For now, we just have the transform tools. If we twirl down the twirler, you can see that we have the 5 basic transform tools. We have anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. Let's just start with the basic and let's go to scale. Let's make sure that our playhead is at the beginning of the clip, and we're going to enable the scale keyframe clock. We'll click that. Notice how that looks like a 18th century watch that someone would pull out of their jacket, okay? That's why we call it a clock. Notice the first keyframe that it laid. It looks like a little diamond. So our starting value right now is at 100% zoom. So let's say that we wanted to start out zoomed in. We'll click in the numbers, and for now we'll type 300. Press return. Notice how both values changed because the lock is on. That's the value of the first keyframe. Here's the monitor. You can see that we're zoomed in on the media file. So let's say we want to zoom out over time. I recommend clicking in the time code and specifying how long you'd like the scale to change, for example. So we were at 0. So let's say we want it to happen over 3 seconds. We'll type 300, which would be a value of 3 seconds. We'll click OK. Notice how it advanced the playhead. And now let's come back in here into the scale value, and we'll type 100, and we'll press return. And watch when we do, it adds a second keyframe. So it will change over time between those keyframes. Let's zoom out and let's press the space bar to preview our scale. Okay, this machine has a gigabyte of RAM and a pretty good G4 processor, so it shouldn't take too long for it to give you a preview of the scale effect. Notice how it is turning green. See that right there? The green line above the media file layer. That indicates that's been loaded into RAM, and if your machine is fast enough, it should play in real time. So now the media file is loaded into memory, and we know this because the top layer is green. When we play it back, we should get a real-time or very close to real-time preview. Okay, so there is our scale effect. Now, if I want to perfectly position the playhead on one of these keyframes so that I can make an adjustment, if we come over here and look under scale, there's the value. See these arrows? These arrows allow me to jump to the keyframe. Very handy. So that I can make very precise changes on that keyframe. If I want to change the position of the keyframes, well, I can just grab them and drag them and move them to wherever I want. Notice when the keyframe gets perfectly centered on the position indicator that we get the check mark. Watch when I move the keyframe off the playhead, the check mark disappears, and we can move it back, and there it's locked in. Now we'll use time code to go back to the 3-second mark. The playhead perfectly moves, and then we move this keyframe into position. And once we get it right on the playhead, which we're having a little bit of trouble, it is difficult. We may need to zoom in a little bit. We'll grab the little slider and zoom in, and now it will be a little bit easier to lock the keyframe on there, okay? There we go, there's our check mark. So we flipped the scale. Let's press the space bar. It's loading it into memory. It's not a full frame rate. We're probably getting 10, 15 frames per second here. And there you go. So now it turned green. The effect is loaded into memory. Let's back it up. Let's play it again. Okay, now that we've animated the scale of this particular layer, let's work with the opacity. I'm going to zoom in and take a closer look at opacity. Let's make sure that we turn on our keyframe clock. And that lays our first keyframe that you can see. We actually want a value of 0, so we'll click in and choose 0. And now we will use the arrow actually for the scale layer to jump to the last scale keyframe. And we'll come over here and let's set a value of 100. Type 100, press return, and let's move our playhead back to the beginning. Let's zoom out and take a look. Okay, the computer's moving a little bit slower, obviously because it's having to load the opacity and scale into RAM. Okay, there's the media file. We'll stop it. Let's back it up, play it back. And you can see that it plays almost in real time now that it's loaded into the memory. What are some accidents that can happen with the keyframe clocks? If I accidentally turn this off, notice that I lose my keyframe data. So you want to watch that. We're going to go Apple Z to undo or Control Z PC. So be careful. If you lay a bunch of keyframes down and you turn that off, you'll lose it. Okay, speaking of levels of undo, let's go to our preferences for a second. Let's click on the name After Effects and let's choose Preferences and let's go to General. So inside of General you can see by default it's giving you 32 levels of undo. You have up to 99, so you might want to address that if you want a lot of levels of undo. Let's click OK. We'll go back to Preferences later. Okay, so now what we want to do is let's bring down another layer so we can see how other layers interact. What I'm going to do is use my position indicator as an endpoint. So I'm going to drag it to about the position that I want it, and I'll notice that my time code is almost 10 seconds, so I might as well type in 1000 for 10 seconds. Okay, so I want another clip to start. So I'm going to go through my footage, and I'm looking for a shot of Brock Mellows getting out of the car. I'm going to expand this window out so that I can see the file names better. And when I do, notice it shows me a lot of information about the clip. It gives me the clip name, the file type, how many megabytes, the duration, and where it's located on the computer. So I'm going to scroll up using the arrows, and I'm actually looking for a shot of Brock getting out of the car. And notice I'm scrolling through them and it's giving me a thumbnail. Here we go, I found the shot that I want. I'm going to double click on it just to scrub through it to verify, and there's the shot. Okay, we don't need all this shot. We're going to have to trim the media file or set in and out points, but we can't do that in this window. So my position indicator is in place, acting as an endpoint on the timeline that we can think as an editor. We're going to grab the media file and we're going to actually drag it down. And notice that little black line, how it goes above or below. We actually want to go above. And there's the clip. So if we back up the playhead, you can see the cut. So if we want to do a dissolve, we can collapse the top twirler, collapse transform, and get to opacity. But that was a lot of clicks, right? So what about a shortcut? It's pretty simple, actually. To remember our 5 basic transform shortcuts, the only one that doesn't really make sense is opacity. And if we press T, that will give us opacity. S for scale, R for rotation, A for anchor point, and P for position. We actually want opacity, so we'll press T again, and there's the opacity. We'll turn on the keyframe clock. We'll set a value of 0 because we want to start out with 0 opacity, right? And since we're at about 10 seconds, let's do a 2-second dissolve. So we want to go to the 11-second mark. We'll type in 1100. Notice that it says 11 seconds. We'll click OK. It advances our playhead. And now let's go over here to the value where it says 0. Let's click and we'll type 100 and press return. So that's how you do a dissolve or a fade from one shot to the other in After Effects. So we'll press the space bar and we'll preview through. And there you go. You can see the dissolve or fade. And once it turns green and it loads into RAM, we can go back and preview it and watch it play a little bit faster. So that's how you do a dissolve in After Effects. You have to use the opacity keyframes. So the next thing we might want to do is trim the out points on this clip. Now that we have it on the timeline, we may not want it to last to the almost 20-second mark. So let's zoom in and take a closer look at the file. Notice these gray handles. If we click and hold down on the gray handle, you can actually trim the media file. Notice it shows an outline of where the existing media used to be. We can also trim the front, but if you do that, obviously your keyframes aren't going to work now. If I move the entire media clip, the keyframes, however, will follow. Okay, so I'm going to undo and undo to get back where we were. So I can trim this way, but if I double click on the layer, it will actually open the media file in its own window. This window allows us to do a lot of different things. We can set our in and out points, for example. Down here we can scrub through the media file. When we move this playhead, it actually does move the playhead on the timeline in relationship to that video clip. Okay, let's say we want that to be the out point. Down here on the bottom left-hand side of this window, notice we can click on out, and when we do, it trims the media file to the out point, and it also trims the media file on the timeline. So this is a little bit more precise, and you get time code. We can also draw masks, which we'll do a little bit later in this window. Let's zoom back out. Let's go ahead and close out this tab so we aren't confused. And then we'll scrub back. You can see how we have trimmed the media file. Okay, we've done a little bit of work here, and if the computer were to crash on us or fall asleep and we lose the project, well, we'd have to do everything again. So that's kind of my rule on saving. If you don't feel like doing it again, save it. Right now you can see it says Untitled Project. So let's talk about saving our After Effects project. We'll click on File. And of course we could just go Save, but then it would be called Untitled Project. But if we go Save As, we can actually give the file a name. Okay, let's say that we want to save this file, and all we plan to use are these two files. There's actually a feature in After Effects where we can collect all the files that we're using and save the project file with it. So we're going to go File, Collect Files, and instead of collecting all 21 of the files that's in our project, we're going to click and hold down, and we're going to say for all comps. And you can see that we're using these two files and that they will be collected. So in other words, it will pull a copy of these files out of the other folder and put them in our new folder. We'll click on Collect, and there it is. It's called Demo Folder. You can see that we've named our project demo.aep, and we'll click Save. And it will pull those files out of the folders on the AV drive, and it will put a copy of the clips in with the project file. Alright, you can see that it reopens After Effects after it does it. Let's go After Effects, Hide After Effects. And you can see on the desktop we have a folder here. It says Demo Folder, 3 items. If we double click on that, there's the footage and there's the project file again. So the file that's on the desktop outside of here could actually be tossed out, or that could be our backup file. Okay, in this segment I'm going to show you how to use a mask in After Effects. We have the playhead on the timeline queued up where we want to come into our next shot. I'm going to grab Bush Bunny and drop it on the timeline, and here is this shot. To add a mask to the clip, it's pretty simple. We could use the marquee tool out of our tools. We'll click and grab the rectangle marquee tool, and you can see our mask. All right, let's go back and get our selection tool, and let's twirl down the twirler so you can see that masks has been added. You can see the mask twirler next to transform. If we twirl down that twirler, you can see that we have mask 1, and yes, we can have more masks, and we'll twirl down again, and you can see our options that we can keyframe on this particular mask. Yes, we can rotoscope and animate it, but we're going to keep it simple in the beginning, and we'll just make a static mask. So let's zoom back out. Now what we want to do is actually trim in the mask itself. I don't know if you can see these solid yellow blocks here. What we need to do is make these blocks solid and then select them with the shift key. So we want this block, and then we'll hold down the shift key, and we're going to grab this block down here, and that way we can trim in the mask. Okay, we have those two blocks grabbed, and we're just trimming that back like so. Now we could do this numerically down here under mask shape. If we click on shape, we can type in the values if we want to do that. Okay, we'll cancel out of that for right now. So here's our mask, and we're getting a shot of Andy seeing the bunny. Okay, we're actually going to get that other angle with this. Now let's make this a little bit smoother. We don't want it just to cut on. We actually probably might want that shot to dissolve on. So we'll have the layer selected, T for opacity, turn on the keyframe clock for opacity, 0. And that's at 6:14 on the time code. Let's let that happen in 1 second. So we're going to go 17:14. Press the return key, it advances the playhead. Let's type in 100% for the opacity. So we've made that fade up. Okay, like so, and then he sees the bunny. Now it has a hard edge here. If I click in the background, and let's zoom in and take a closer look, you can see that hard edge there. We can actually finesse that a little bit better, and we can use what's called a mask feather. Let's select the layer that we've applied the mask to, and let's press F for feather, and that's the shortcut key. And let's go ahead and maybe type in a value of 50 for the feather, and let's look at the edge as we press return, and you can see that softened that edge up nicely. All right, here we go. Let's click in the background, and we'll back up and let's watch. So the shot dissolves on, and we have our mask. Andy seeing the bunny. Okay, look here what happened. When we lose the shot underneath the top layer, it drops to black. So we're probably going to need to drop out of these two files at the same time. Let's use our slider down here at the bottom of the timeline. Let's go ahead and trim these media files back, and that way we'll go ahead and cut to another shot. Okay, let's go ahead and let's get over the shoulder, and let's bring that shot down to the timeline and drop it. And now when we press the bar, you can see we did our cutaway from those two layers. Okay, it's kind of an awkward cut, depending if you're from the MTV generation or the old school generation. Old school might call that a jump cut, and the MTV generation might think that's cool. Okay, let's say that we're ready to output this segment and bring it back into Final Cut Pro, even though everything that we did here we could do in Final Cut, but let's say that we did it here. Let's make this into a video clip that's compatible with Final Cut that we don't have to render once we go inside of Final Cut. Let's click on Composition, and we're going to go to Make Movie, or Apple M, or Control M on the PC, and it opens up our Make Movie window. Let's zoom in and take a closer look at our settings. Render settings, if we click on this, we just want to make sure that the quality is best, the resolution is full, and over here is where you can adjust the time, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. But we're going to go ahead and just take the whole thing. We'll click OK. And the next all-important thing here is the output module. If we click on lossless, you can see that we can output in a lot of different formats. Right now it's QuickTime Movie, but I'll just give you a peek at some of the other formats that we can output here. All sorts of stuff, but once again we're staying focused on outputting for Final Cut or Premiere or for Avid. So we're going to choose QuickTime Movie, and then if we click on Format Options, it's going to look exactly the same as the Final Cut Pro export. Okay, for the compression type, we want to choose DV/DVC Pro NTSC. There's the frame rate, 29.97, best quality interlaced video, and 4:3 for DV interlaced. We're going to click OK. And then if we have audio, we want to turn on the audio, and let's zoom in and take a closer look at that. So now we've turned on the audio. More than likely, we've recorded at 48K 16-bit stereo. Alright, so we'll click OK. The next thing we need to make sure that the file is named properly. Right now it's called Demo1, and we'll just break the rules and let's put it on the desktop. There it is, Demo1. We'll click Save, and then now all we have to do is click on the render button. And you can see that After Effects is calculating the frames for you, tells you how much of your RAM is being used, what the elapsed time is, and here in just a little bit it will give you an estimated time. There we go. It says it's going to take about 3 minutes for this to render out. So we'll check back with you when this is done. Okay, you can see the QuickTime file that rendered out. We'll double click on it just to open it up and check it. Here we go. We'll just scrub through the file. There you go. This clip is ready to bring into Final Cut Pro. Okay, in this segment I want to talk to you about using effects in After Effects. We've selected the layer that we'd like to apply an effect to, and then we're going to do it the long way, and then I'll show you the shortcut. So we'll go up here to the top menu and we'll choose Effect, and let's just keep it real simple in the beginning. We're going to go to Adjust, and we'll go to Brightness and Contrast. Okay, when I choose that effect, it opens up what's called the Effect Control window. Notice the little F to turn on and off the effect. And we also have keyframe clocks where we can animate the brightness and contrast. So I'll just crank up the contrast in this window, and you can see the result of that. So let's zoom back out. Alright, so you get the idea that we can tweak this stuff out and do some pretty cool effects. But how do we animate those effects? We do it with keyframes. So we can do it in this window, but I'm going to show you how to do it down here on the composition first because I think it'll be a little bit easier for you. So if we twirl down the twirler, you can see that we have effects with the transform tools. So we'll twirl down effects, and there's our brightness and contrast that's located under the effects. If we twirl that down, there are the keyframes. Let's zoom back out. So we first see this clip as it's dissolving in, and let's say we want the effect to change over time. Well, we want to turn on this keyframe clocks, right? We'll move the playhead back to close to the beginning of the file. And let's turn on the keyframe clocks for brightness and contrast. And let's move our playhead forward, and then when we actually change the contrast, you can see that it will adjust accordingly, and it will add a keyframe. Let's make that 0, and let's go ahead and make the brightness 0, and press return. Okay, so there's our effect. You can see that it's very contrasty, and it gets back to normal. If we want, we can actually shift select these keyframes and pull them down to the right further, where it will take longer for the effect to happen. All right, let's preview that. Okay, you can see our computer is definitely slowing down a little bit more because we're having to process more effects. So this is the basics of using effects in After Effects. And if we want to temporarily turn it off, like I said, we can do it here in the control window by turning off the F on and off. There you go. If I accidentally close this window, I'll do that. I can get it again just by going to Effect, Effect Controls, or F3. Okay, there it is. Okay, now I'll show you another way to add effects, because we can add as many as our computer can handle to this particular clip. This time we'll right-click on the layer to get to our effects. There it is, Effect. And we'll choose something different this time. Let's go to Distort, and let's choose Magnify. Okay, so notice that we've added the Magnify effect in here in our effects controls. And we'll go through and we'll mess with some of the values. There we go, there's our Magnify effect. And of course, notice that we can keyframe that. We'll turn on the keyframe clock, and we'll advance our playhead, and we'll reduce the magnify effect. Okay, so we'll preview this with the space bar. All right, so there's our magnify effect, and it is changing over time. And our keyframes look a little bit different because we didn't collapse the layer. They look like little circles. But when we come in here and we collapse the twirler, they will be diamond shaped just like the other keyframes. Notice that we can use these arrows to help us line up the magnify. Okay? And then we'll come down here and we'll stretch this one out. Jump down. And we'll line it up. It's pretty close. Okay, we'll just scrub back through that. Okay, so that's the basics of effects. If we want to temporarily disable them, we can turn off these little F's here on the timeline for the effect. Notice that we lost the magnify effect, and we'll turn off the brightness and contrast effect. That's the basics of doing effects with After Effects.